They sold your car and kept the money.
They just told me that they'd sell it and give me the money.
And when victims begged for help,
they ran, they hid.
They were left in the cold.
I was told to stop my investigation.
He was part of a car theft ring that operated in British Columbia and Alberta.
Victor Malarek with a W5 investigative report.
Can you tell us what happened with all the money?
Of the truth behind the promises.
It was obvious something was going on.
The agency that wouldn't help.
They were responsible for it in the first place.
The dubious dealer.
Worked very hard to be in business 10 years.
And the abandoned victims.
They gave him permission to steal.
And
I was shocked.
A difficult birth, a terrifying diagnosis.
This is an unusual situation.
3 children with a devastating neurological disorder.
I felt sick to my stomach.
Destined to a life of challenges.
20 doctors were in the room trying to bring him back.
And a family ready for the fight.
They weren't physically doing the things that they were supposed to do.
Tom Kennedy.
Have you ever seen anything like it before?
No.
With a story of strength and love.
Outpouring of support. Overwhelming.
A family's unbreakable spirit.
How tough is it?
It's tough.
And unending hope for the future.
I want to know what you did today at school.
We've survived thus far.
Hi.
These stories this week on W5. Here is Lloyd Robertson.
Welcome to W5. It seemed like the easy way to sell a used car. Pay a small fee and have a professional sell it for you. That's what dozens of consumers did with their cars with a consignment company called Treadz. That is, until Treadz sold the cars and kept the money, more than $1 million in all. As for the man behind Treadz, well, turns out he has a shady past. But that didn't stop him from being licensed by Anvik, the Alberta regulator who oversees the car sales industry. The sellers were left with dead deals. But as a W5 investigation has discovered, the regulator found out what was going on, but apparently shut down an investigation early on that could have helped the victims. Here is Victor Malarek.
Andrea Sherrill loves her sporty car. Says it's a lot of fun to drive. A car that loves corners and curves. But there's another vehicle in Andrea's life. One that she is stuck paying for. One that doesn't even belong to her any longer. This truck, a 2012 Dodge Ram 3500 that was bought for her ex-boyfriend.
I was in a relationship where my ex had the vehicle for work, and when we separated, I sadly ended up with the truck.
How come?
Because he stopped paying for it.
Well, it was in your name.
And it was in my name, yeah.
And that big truck saddled Andrea with a big debt.
How much money do you pay a month for the truck that you no longer own?
$880.
$880?
Yeah.
Andrea put the truck up for sale online on Kijiji and AutoTrader, but it wasn't selling. No bites. At least until she got a call from a local Calgary car dealership called Treadz. They offered to sell it for her. The man behind Treadz? Owner Sean O'Brien, seen here in local news footage.
Worked very hard to be in business 10 years here in Calgary.
This was the deal. Treadz would sell the truck on consignment on Andrea's behalf. All she had to do was park the vehicle on their lot, sign a contract, and pay Treadz a $299 fee. Asking price, $50,000. Once the truck was sold, Treadz would give her the money within 10 business days.
I thought, I'm not selling it any other way, let's try this.
But the truck didn't seem to be selling at Treadz either, so after a couple of months, she decided to take it back.
When I called and I said, I'm coming to pick up my vehicle on Saturday, they told me that someone was really interested in it.
Miraculously, just as Andrea was about to pick up her truck, she says Treadz told her it had just sold.
So the truck is sold.
Yeah.
You get your money?
No. It just became very clear very quickly that they were running a scam.
In fact, Andrea discovered that Treadz had actually sold the truck long before, 5 weeks earlier. But Treadz never told her that or paid her the money.
I stopped at the dealership and basically lost my mind. I said, you have until the end of the week to pay me, and if you don't have it by the end of the week, you're going to be hearing from lawyers.
And what happened at the end of the week?
It was scurrying mice. They ran, they hid.
Treadz finally sent the check to Andrea's bank for $46,878.12. But it bounced.
10 days later, it came back as insufficient funds. If only the check would have been good. I still have a loan on this vehicle, so I still have to pay for it. Even today, I still have to pay for it every single month.
That's gotta hurt at the end of the month.
Oh yeah, this is why I get pissed off every time that money leaves my bank account.
Little did Andrea know she wasn't the only person getting the same runaround from Treadz. Across town, Mark Boisvert was trying to sell his brother Jarvis's truck, a 2006 GMC Sierra. Sadly, at just 54 years old, Jarvis had died in a tragic accident.
I was going to sell the vehicle and then give my mother the money to pay for the funeral.
That's how Mark came to be at Treadz, where he heard a familiar line. The check is in the mail.
They just told me that they'd sell it and give me the money. And that never happened. They told me the money be in my bank account on a certain date. It wasn't there. And they said it would be on another certain date. It wasn't there.
Getting a runaround.
Getting a runaround. Very depressing. Because my brother died in a tragic accident. Now this here's tragedy also to the family.
And Mark and Andrea aren't alone in their troubles with Treadz. W5 put out a call to people who had dealings with Treadz, and 13 more angry men and women showed up to share their stories.
We saw Treadz and they looked like a normal consignment dealership, so we brought our vehicle to sell it and maybe get something smaller.
How much were you hoping to get for your...
$33,000.
And you got nothing in the end?
Nothing.
And I was given a check from them, and of course the check bounced.
They sold my vehicle and never paid me.
For Marty Buchinsky, it was money he needed for the future, $18,000. He was selling his vehicle because he could no longer drive.
I've got MS, multiple sclerosis. Basically, I'm out of work now because of my disability, and which has caused me to do. I've got 2 kids that are going to school, and that's where the money was going to go, help them along.
Most of the people in this group are out over $250,000 in total after Treadz sold their vehicles but didn't pay them. The owner of Treadz, Sean O'Brien, had been selling cars for about 10 years. But what his customers didn't know is that O'Brien had a shady past. A past that had been revealed to Anvik, the Alberta Motor Vehicle Industry Council, when Sean O'Brien applied for a license. Anvik regulates and licenses the car sales industry in Alberta. And as this promotional video explains, it's supposed to oversee car dealerships like Treadz.
Anvik is there to enforce the provincial laws and regulations that are in place to protect you when you buy a new or used vehicle.
Anvik investigator Owen Michaluk was assigned to look into a complaint that came in about Treadz in May 2014. And who better than an ex-cop to get to the bottom of it?
I retired as a detective and quite a background in fraud investigations.
You know what fraud's all about?
Yes. There was a lot of red flags showing up on this investigation from the very beginning.
Owen helped the victim get the money Treadz owed, but his gut told him there was more to this. So he told his boss at Anvik they needed to act immediately.
In my report, I clearly identified that I felt that this was the tip of the iceberg.
So the red flags went up for you right away?
Absolutely.
When Owen began digging, he discovered that the Alberta Securities Commission had been investigating Sean O'Brien.
An undertaking in 2012 for running an illegal investment scheme that involved the use of cars as the securities.
While running his car dealership, O'Brien had been running ads like this on Treadz website, claiming to pay a very aggressive interest rate of 24% to anyone who invested $50,000. The Securities Commission reached an agreement with O'Brien to stop selling securities to the public. But for Owen, there was an even bigger red flag. Prior to selling cars, Sean O'Brien had a criminal record for stealing them.
He had been involved in a criminal enterprise a number of years prior that involved automobiles, and he had served some jail time.
W5 tracked down Sean O'Brien's court records. In 1993, he was part of a car theft ring that operated in British Columbia and Alberta. The gang stole cars and sold them to unsuspecting buyers. After pleading guilty, the judge said O'Brien's numerous charges showed a serious scheme to steal cars and defraud members of the public. He was convicted of 21 charges and sentenced to 18 months in prison. Now, 20 years later, he was back in the car business, this time as an Anvik licensed dealer. W5 obtained O'Brien's Anvik license application, where he revealed in his own handwriting 163 car theft-related charges and his sentence to jail time.
How did he get a license to sell cars when he was convicted for stealing cars?
And that was going to be the subject of my investigation moving forward.
Yeah, giving this guy a license to sell cars is like saying, hey, let's put the fox in the hen house.
That's correct.
Andrea Sherrill says that's outrageous.
He should have never gotten a license to sell cars. With a criminal history for fraud, you shouldn't get that.
You think Anvik gave Sean O'Brien a license to steal?
In a sense, yeah. They gave him permission to steal. They enabled him to do this.
And while consumers like Andrea were still waiting for the money O'Brien owed them, Treadz closed its doors and went out of business, leaving approximately 120 Treadz customers out at least $1.6 million. That's
the word.
We wanted to ask Sean O'Brien what went on at Treadz and what happened to the money, but he didn't respond to our request for an interview. We caught up with him at his home.
Mr. O'Brien, my name is Victor Malrick. I'm with W5 CTV. Is there a possibility to talk to you about Treadz?
No, I wasn't doing any interviews or anything on that.
Nothing at all?
No, I've been advised not to talk about it.
Can I ask you what happened to all
you
the
sent me a
cars?
letter, though. I didn't respond.
Can you tell us what happened with all the money?
No, unfortunately, I can't talk about any of that. Thank you, though.
Can you talk about your earlier criminal conviction in Vancouver, in BC?
No, we can't talk about anything.
For a smooth-talking car salesman, he seemed at a loss for words.
This here's your car.
Donna Beck had a top-of-the-line Infiniti, but at 75 years old, found it wasn't right for her anymore.
It was just too much car for me. Huge. And as you get older, your neck doesn't work so good anymore, so I decided to get something smaller.
So she took her car to Treadz, a Calgary car dealership that sold cars on consignment. Donna signed a contract for Treadz to sell her car on her behalf. Treadz sold her car all right, but never gave Donna the money.
I went and got a check, post-dated for a week. I knew I was in trouble. I mean, it was obvious something was going on if they're postponing payment for a week.
As soon as you get a post-dated check, you're thinking to yourself,
hello, yeah.
Did you ever see your car again?
No.
Donna is not alone. More than 100 people took their cars to Treadz to sell on their behalf, but they never got the money or saw their cars again. W5 tracked many of the vehicles. Some have been re-registered thousands of kilometers away in other provinces, and some are still right here in Calgary, like this one. But police say the cars are not considered stolen because of the contracts the owner signed. We found Donna's car just 25 minutes from her home.
We found your car here.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, taking a look at it.
There it is. Oh, for heaven's sake.
Looking good, eh?
Yeah, it is. Needs a little wash, but looking good. That's nice to see it. I hope she's happy with her new owner.
Mm-hmm. So now you're out $30,000, but you got nothing for it.
No, I didn't. I gave it away, and had I known I was giving it away, I think I could have found some worthy friends of mine who might have enjoyed it.
Donna never saw any money from the owner of Treadz, Sean O'Brien. But there was hope for people like Donna, a man trying to reunite the cars with their owners, or at least get their money back. Owen Michaluk was an investigator with Anvik, the regulator of the automobile sales industry in Alberta.
My task was to try and resolve this on behalf of the 125 victims.
Owen thought one way to get money back to the victims could be as simple as lifting the $300,000 cap on Anvik's Consumer Compensation Fund.
Part of my investigation was to determine whether this fund could be expanded to allow victims to be compensated if I could determine that these red flags indicated Anvik perhaps was culpable in allowing him to have a license and not acting soon enough.
Instead, Owen says management shut down his investigation.
I was basically gagged. I was told to stop my investigation. I was to turn over all my notes, all my information, and refer all inquiries from these victims to management.
Owen says the decision to stop the investigation handcuffed him.
It was shut down prematurely.
Did you ever go to management and say, hey, what the heck are you doing here? Consumer protection is our mandate. Why aren't you allowing me to do my job?
They were concerned that my zeal in getting some justice to these victims would put them in a position of lawsuits.
What happens in the end?
Well, in the end, the file gets shut down. I'm removed from the file, ordered not to talk to any of the victims I've been working closely with, and intimidated that if I continued my investigations, I'd be terminated.
And that's what Owen says happened next. For all of his efforts, he was fired.
My focus at the end that ultimately got me fired was trying to help these victims of Treadz.
The month after Owen was terminated, Anvik wrote to Treadz victims, including Donna, telling them the file was closed.
We're just letting you know that we're closing the case.
What does closing the case mean?
Well, that's what we all were wondering. What does that mean? What did they do for a year? The letter said, we've done everything we can and our investigation is now closed.
The letter from Anvik also said Donna might get some money from the compensation fund, but not enough to cover everything she lost. And they told her it would take 3 years before she'd see anything.
You think you'll ever see any of that money?
Honestly, no. I'd be very, very surprised.
What do you think of Anvik now?
What's the point of having it?
And it seems Donna isn't the only one asking that question. Service Alberta is the provincial ministry responsible for Anvik. Around the same time that Anvik was investigating Treadz, Service Alberta was conducting a confidential review of Anvik's investigative operations. That confidential draft report, obtained by W5, found that basic investigative principles were often not followed at Anvik. The report also raises questions about interference in investigations from Anvik's director, John Buchinsky. Investigators indicated that they are frequently provided direction as to how to proceed with an investigation, and those directions suggested the appropriate outcome of an investigation.
I'm not about to speculate whether...
The new Minister of Service Alberta is Darren Billis, seen here at a press conference. We wanted to talk to him about the government review of Anvik and the trouble at Treadz, but he declined our request, saying that the issues we wanted to discuss are very likely to be raised in court. However, in an email, a spokesperson for the minister said the department is aware of the problems and the public's concerns about consumer protection in the auto industry, adding that Service Alberta will be taking a thorough look at Anvik's operations and effectiveness. Owen says that Service Alberta report is an accurate reflection of his experience at Anvik.
In your investigation of Treadz, did John Buchinsky interfere in that investigation?
Through his delegate, my supervisor, a number of restrictions were placed on me, and I felt encumbered in doing a thorough investigation.
That's bizarre. That's like interference of the worst kind.
In my view, it was obstruction of a peace officer in the performance of his duty. They've identified clearly in that report that the architect of many of the problems is John Buchinsky.
John Buchinsky spoke with W5 in February 2015 after our hidden camera investigation of new car dealerships in Calgary. At the time, he had no comment on the provincial government's review of Anvik.
I'm not in a position to comment on it. It's a confidential report. It's a draft report that Anvik hasn't had a chance to respond to.
When we asked him for an interview this time, he wasn't so accommodating. John Buchinsky and Anvik declined W5's request and sent an email quoting John Buchinsky. We at Anvik are committed to protecting automotive consumers wherever possible within our delegated authority. Although we would welcome the opportunity to discuss this matter, as Treadz is under investigation by Calgary Police, and as there is a civil lawsuit currently before the courts, it would be inappropriate for us to comment further at this time. So we went straight to Edmonton and Anvik's head office to try and speak to him in person.
Hi, my name is Victor Malrick. I'm with the CTV.
Okay.
I was wondering, I gather Mr. Buchinsky's not in?
No, he's not.
Can I leave you my card?
He never called. 1 week later, we caught up with Buchinsky here in Old Montreal. He was at this posh boutique hotel at a meeting of provincial automobile sales regulators. The topic, consumer protection.
Mr. Buchinsky, can I speak to you about Treadz, please?
Excuse me, I'm late for a meeting.
Can I speak to you about
no,
Treadz? You can't speak at all?
Not at this time. You know it would be appropriate for me to make a comment at this time.
Well, yeah,
It's
but
before the courts. Thank you.
Here for a meeting on consumer protection, but too busy and not willing to talk about consumers who have been victimized back in his home province.
So Anvik, helpful to anybody here?
No. They were responsible for it in the first place. So then they leave us all out and say, well, maybe in 3 years we'll give you enough to buy a new set of tires instead of your $40,000 or $50,000 vehicle. They victimize us again after the criminal that they were supposed to protect us from victimized us.
Service Alberta is politically responsible for Anvik. Service Alberta help you guys out?
No.
The group feels let down by Anvik, but the Calgary Police Service is investigating. And in the meantime, many are relying on each other to get through it.
It must be very hard on you?
It is. It is, but I'm getting by. It's big support here. Right here.
So this is your support group?
This is it.
The victims of Treadz have launched a class action lawsuit against Anvik, Service Alberta, and Sean O'Brien. But the case has yet to be certified by the courts.
Where does the investigation into Treadz stand with the Calgary Police?
The Calgary Police Service took over the investigation in August of 2014, and it's been assigned out to a primary investigator that has multiple support partners in place. And we are full bore on the investigation. We've uncovered 120 victims, 150 vehicles, and also spoken to third-party buyers and multiple witnesses.
We've spoken to a lot of victims who are complaining that, you know, we had our cars consigned to Treadz, to this guy, Sean O'Brien. He sold them, we didn't get our money back, we went to the police. What the heck is taking so long?
As you can well imagine, fraud investigations are extremely complex. It's not unheard of for fraud investigations to take upwards of 2 years. In this case, when you're talking about 120 victims, you need to gather evidence that they are providing you. So witness statements, documentation supporting the consignment agreements, other forms of documentation. We have to be able to prove where the money went and how the loss was incurred. Something like this we want to do to a very high standard, as we do with all of our frauds, so that we get likelihood of conviction. We don't want to just put a package together when it's not ready based on a story provided by the victim and that alone. We want to make sure we have all of our ducks in a row in order to get a positive outcome in court.
What kind of timeline are we looking at when you and the police service will lay charges?
I will liken it to peeling an onion. The more we go through, the more layers of the investigation are unveiled, and the more we have to organize the information and make sure it's presentable. We're looking at least potentially at another 6 months to get that all done. With any kinds of fraud, actually, when you have one-offs with time in between, those are very difficult to prove that they're criminal. When there's a contract in place and there's money promised and there's a default on that, but it's just a one-off. What we look for to prove criminality is intent. And how we do that is by getting a pattern of these types of things so that we can show that that pattern proves that there was criminal intent.